Welcome back to the Cruise Elite Podcast. What's up, Tony?
Good morning, Taylor. You're on a shiny, newer computer.
Yes, and I'll have a shinier, newer computer for myself very, very soon. This is Alicia's, so mine's coming.
That's so exciting. I treat my cars and my computers the same. I get the best one that I can at the time, and then I just rock it till the wheels fall off. Man.
Yeah, that's basically how I am too. I'm the same way, and with cars and computers, I'm not a huge tech guy, and when I get something new like that, I'm excited for like a week, and then a week later, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. I don't even care about this. It just has to do the most basic things.
Yeah.
When we got our last car, I was like, this is incredible. Like, it felt so different. And then like a week later, I was like, I feel no difference between this and my old one, even though there is a huge difference.
I feel like there's ancient wisdom in that statement, you know?
Yeah.
The shiny new thing brings fleeting joy.
Yeah.
So I was editing the previous podcast, and I just started thinking about brain freeze. Have you ever had brain freeze?
As in, like, you eat something cold and it freezes your brain?
You're eating that delicious ice cream sandwich too fast.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, there's this like cold pain that goes up like your throat and then into your head.
Yeah,
and it feels like your head is like
it's like
clamping
it's like
down or
almost
something.
a migraine for a split second.
Yeah. Do you think that is a form of viscerally mediated pain?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure. Man, I wish I could remember. Long ago, I was at a seminar learning from an instructor who I really respect. He's really great. And he talked about brain freeze. Of course, I don't remember that much. And I was laughing because he even knew the scientific name for it. I don't really know the mechanism other than I have a feeling it involves trigeminal nerve.
Okay. Just based on like where it's going and where it's coming from.
I have a feeling there's a lot of trigeminal involved in that.
Yeah, I'd be curious, just as like a nerdy endeavor to like kind of trace that out and like
that would be funny.
Understanding brain freeze from an applied neuro perspective.
It's funny. Like not long ago, we had to explain to our daughter what that is.
Oh yeah,
and it's funny. So now she's familiar with the term, and it's just funny when she brings it up.
I mean, I feel like as a kid, like you learn it quick because the excitement of the cold treat begets the feeling of brain freeze.
That's funny.
Cool, man. So we've got a really, really interesting episode today.
Yeah.
In your practice, it sounds like for whatever reason, and we'll actually probably get into why this is the case, but it seems like a lot of chiropractors gravitate to your work.
Yeah.
And are interested in using applied neurology to better their practice. And so today we're going to talk all about that, all about using applied neurology in kind of a more chiropractic context. And I think it'll be a great way to, A, always talking about the same concepts that we talk about with applied neuro, but B, for any movement coach or fitness or health professional, you know, kind of how to integrate this stuff into what you're already doing.
Right.
You know, you were wise to tag me in a post in the dojo where you were asking, hey, we're going to be doing this podcast like about this. Do you have any questions? And that was kind of the big thing that I noticed was that the challenge in integrating this stuff when you already have this other kind of workflow, structure, paradigm that your clients are expecting of you, right?
Yes.
So I think that's an interesting part of the conversation as well.
It's a huge part of the conversation. In fact, even if you're not a chiropractor, you could be a massage therapist. I mean, it's very similar for massage therapists and even physical therapists.
Yeah.
It's just, it's kind of the whole integrating the work into what you're already doing, like your current practice. It's kind of the elephant in the room when you're in an educational phase and you're learning something new. I feel like all the excitement is always based around the new theory and the new application. And then when you're excited about that and you're learning, and then you kind of come out the backside eventually and the smoke clears and you're like, whoa, how do I actually integrate this into my practice? Like you said, my clients are expecting something very specific from me. Mm-hmm. Can I change it? How do I change it? What if what I'm doing that's new doesn't work? Mm-hmm. Right? It works so perfectly on a Saturday morning at the seminar.
Yeah.
And then you bring it to your practice and you're like, gulp, like what? Like what's going on? Like it didn't work like this last Saturday. So there's a lot to talk about in terms of integrating it.
Yeah. Yeah. To start, I think it would be great to just get kind of a very, bird's eye view level explanation of chiropractic as you understand it, mm-hmm. Not being a chiropractor, and just kind of giving the rest of us kind of an entry point to understand, like, what are they doing? What's the goal here? Mm-hmm. And then why is applied neurology relevant?
Yeah. So, for starters, I'm not a chiropractor. So even what I know about chiropractic is somewhat limited. But I think where everybody's mind goes when we talk about chiropractic is kind of what we would see in a more traditional chiropractic setting, where everything is generally based around what is called an adjustment model. Mm-hmm. So, typically people who have had chiropractic care before know that you may have had, your spine manipulated by a chiropractor, meaning it's a joint mobilization, generally a high speed joint mobilization. And if you're lucky enough, you feel a nice snap, crackle, pop, and hopefully it feels better. And you're on your way after that, right? Because a lot of times with the traditional model, you get an adjustment or two or three or whatever, and you're on a table when this happens, and then it's a very quick session if it's a more traditional chiropractic session, and then you are on your feet again and you're out the door and you're like, wow, that was cool. That only took like 15 minutes and my neck feels a little bit better, and I'm going to move on with things. So that's kind of the traditional model. I will say though that there are a lot of chiropractors out there that do a lot of different things as well. Mm-hmm. Okay, and it's very common in a chiropractic practice for them to have a lot of different offerings and services. Everything from the classical adjustment model to different forms of manual therapy, different kinds of postural analysis. And what you're starting to see now is that there's actually a lot of technology involved in this too. So you can't put a blanket over all chiropractors because technically they're all different. They're all doing different things, most of them anyway. There are still some practices that are pretty much only doing the adjustment model, but that now is starting to even get phased out just because things have been progressing, very quickly in the industry. And I think that chiropractors are just getting a lot of different kinds of education, getting exposure to different forms of technology that they can use within their practice. And so some of these facilities are like state of the art and they do a lot of cool things. So hard to say it's hard to say like this is what chiropractic is, because even some chiropractors are doing basic, movement rehabilitation as well. Right. So they can wear a lot of hats, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So one of the through lines is like, maybe there's this foundation of this adjustment model in there, but at their core, it sounds like they're trying to improve posture. Yeah. They're trying to improve movement, maybe decrease pain. This all sounds like stuff that we talk about a lot over here.
Totally. I mean, I think typically someone, if they seek out chiropractic care, it's probably because they have a pain limitation or complaint, right? Yeah. I think that's typically how people find chiropractors for the most part.
Yeah. Okay. So, someone is a chiropractor and their goal is to decrease pain, back pain, neck pain, migraines, whatever it is that falls under their purview. Mm-hmm. How do you start thinking about like incorporating applied neurology for them specifically?
Yeah, so it's really not different than how I would be teaching to any of our students. Mm-hmm. The thing, so there's definitely some There's some obstacles that we probably should end up talking about too. But basically, at a very baseline level, the way that I see applied neuro, the way that we're teaching it fitting into their practice is having, a handful of assessments that they can run in addition to the other things that they like to do, and getting some of those initial evaluations, like testing the cerebellum, right, where you get a coordination assessment that tells you a lot about a person's brain function, and that can really help you make smarter decisions about what you're going to do next. Even if you are a chiropractor who plans to use the adjustment model as your main form of therapy, cerebellar tests can actually help you make decisions on where you might provide those adjustments. Because here's the thing that I want to say. Chiropractors, I kind of feel bad for chiropractors because they're actually really smart. And if you look at everybody across the industry, chiropractors in some instances have a lot more education about the nervous system, and they were the ones studying the nervous system before anyone else.
Interesting.
But people rag on chiropractors and a lot of the time say like it's a scam business and a scam model. And there are some major problems to the model that we can maybe talk about. But people point the finger and say, well, it's just a scam. Their adjustments don't do anything. And saying an adjustment doesn't do anything, if that statement is made by somebody, all that does is prove that somebody doesn't know anything. Because even a chiropractic adjustment is a stimulus. So anytime there's an applied stimulus, guess what? There's always an outcome. And so whether or not you believe in chiropractic or not, I mean, that's that's kind of a different conversation. Chiropractic adjustments are a stimulus that affect the brain and the nervous system. And some people actually do quite well with that stimulus. So I feel bad kind of for chiropractors sometimes because people point the finger. I think the reason why the practice gets ragged on a bit is more about the model, the traditional model of like, okay, you got 15 minutes with your chiropractor, snap, crackle, pop, now get out of here, next person. And that's one of the major obstacles to integrating applied neuro actually in a chiropractic office. Because if you are using more of a traditional adjustment model and you're kind of like a factory where people are just coming in the door, you're adjusting them and they're leaving, it absolutely is the biggest obstacle to applying neuro because now you just simply don't have time. So there are some major obstacles there that come down to mainly time being the issue. But let's say that time is not the issue, and the way I see it is like between cerebellar assessments and using gait assessment as kind of your initial things that you might do in addition to whatever else you like to do as a chiropractor. You can get a ton of information from those forms of assessment that will then guide you on what you might do next, whether you decide to use the adjustment model, or a lot of chiropractors like to just prescribe exercises too. So your exercise prescription can actually become better based on these neuro assessments.
Let's talk briefly about stimulus.
Yeah.
An adjustment, as far as I understand it, like when I see a video of like a chiropractor, they're usually like manipulating a joint, like the neck or the arm or both, and they're getting it in a certain position, and then they're applying like force, and you hear the snap, crackle, pop you're talking about. And a lot of times people look very relieved and grateful for the intervention. I bet it feels fantastic. I've never gotten it done. But
oh, really?
That's what it looks like to me.
I mean,
it looks like it feels really good. In terms of like how we talk about like touch, and from a neuro lens, how would you kind of categorize that adjustment?
Yeah, it's a great question.
As a stimulus.
It's a super strong stimulus. That's why I laugh when people are like, oh, that does nothing. Like some people are like, chiropractors are just trying to make sounds with your body so that you think something happened. That is ridiculous to say. Again, there's reasons why the adjustment model might not work for a lot of people. Maybe we'll talk about them, but there's also reasons why it could. Okay, so it's a very strong stimulus. And I think where you were going with that, the word is receptor, right? It's a very strong receptor stimulus. And it's also a very strong cerebellar stimulus. And it's a very specific cerebellar stimulus because most of the adjustments, if we're talking about kind of the traditional form that people are familiar with, a chiropractor will kind of get you to relax. They will put you in a specific body position, generally bring your joints to or close to end range of motion. And then they enact this very high speed thrusting action that mobilizes a joint or several joints at once. And see, this is also a big problem. And again, why I think they get the fingers pointed at them. There's not time to educate people on what's actually happening. Okay. If we're talking about the traditional model. So the person on the table thinks that they're putting their joints back in place.
Right.
Right. I mean, that's like how people.
I'm out of alignment.
Yes.
I need those bones to get pushed into the right place.
That's right. That's right. And that's the general population that if you were to, survey the general population, they're basically going to tell you, oh yeah, so if your joints are out of place, a chiropractor can put them back in. And that's what the noise is when you get cracked. Right. That's not really what's happening. Your joints can have alignment issues and kind of, tension built up in certain body areas and muscles that are reflexively responding to maybe joint position not being ideal or, different compensatory patterns that happen in the body for good reason. They're mainly protective outputs. And that tension that forms in the body is going to affect joint position very, very minimally. So joints out of place, we would actually look at as like dislocation. You know what I mean? Like, and that's a whole different thing. But manipulating, through this chiropractic adjustment idea is basically using a high-speed thrust to mobilize a joint. And oftentimes the cracking that you might feel or hear, oftentimes that is a gas release coming from the joint area. And there's even like chemical reasons for why, like things that happen at the chemical level for why that might feel better, which is interesting. I don't know a ton about it, but it's interesting. And anytime you mobilize a joint, reflexively, you're going to get changes in muscle tone. So you can receive a chiropractic adjustment and get changes in muscle tone instantly. And that also could be why, you feel better, after an adjustment. So it's a strong cerebellar stimulus because anytime you adjust a joint like that, or anytime you move a joint, especially at end range of motion, because there's more mechanoreceptive activity happening when you move a joint at end range of motion.
Interesting.
And the cerebellum is very responsive to that mechanoreceptor activity. So high speed is a very strong stimulus, right? If you think about speeds, it's different sets of receptors. It's very specific. There are nerve endings that respond more to like slow stretch type of movements. So think about like, what you might do in a yoga type of, context where maybe you're taking a muscle through a full range of motion and sort of relaxing into a position and getting more of a stretch receptor stimulus on the muscle. Well, there's nerve endings that are going to be responsive to slow styles of movement. There are nerve endings that are going to be responsive to more kind of torsion-based movements, right? And there are nerve receptors that are going to be responsive to high-speed movements, right? So we have lots of different nerve endings that respond to all these different kinds of mechanical force and speed. And so with chiropractic in the traditional adjustment model, it is a very specific stimulus. And so what would we say, or what do we know about these different kinds of stimuli, or the way that we use them, is that, well, everybody is going to respond to maybe one thing, and they're not going to respond as well to the next thing. And a lot of our response to any therapeutic kind of intervention or exercise is going to be based on our receptors' needs or our nervous system's needs. So one person might swear by chiropractic and say, hey, that's amazing for me. I feel great.
Yeah.
And somebody else who's maybe in need of a different receptor load, has different things going on, might be like, yeah, that didn't work for me. In some cases, it even made me worse. Right. And so it's not different than kind of running any intervention or philosophy or therapy through our neuro lens.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you for taking us through that. That's super helpful. So you mentioned, kind of as a way to incorporate this, you mentioned two things. You mentioned cerebellar tests and gait assessments.
Yeah. Those would be two good ones.
Now, are these things that are already kind of a known quantity in the chiropractic field at large, do you think? Or is this like more a neuro thing, and it's just people who have specifically dived into neuro that are doing this?
Yeah, it's just totally dependent on the actual practitioner. I think there's plenty of chiropractors out there that have a lot of education on the nervous system, and they are doing cerebellar testing. They are doing things like Romberg's and sharpened Romberg's assessments, where we look at balance, and they may be looking at gait assessment too. Haven't really met many chiropractors that are doing like a neurologic gait assessment necessarily, but they might have a form of gait assessment that they use. And some of these chiros even kind of cross over into the functional neurology world, where they're looking even more deeply at neurology, and probably doing some vision and vestibular examinations. And as I said, some of these practices have great technology. So they may even be, if you start getting into the world of functional neurology, which is very high level stuff, they're putting goggles on you and looking very closely at what your eyes are actually doing.
Interesting.
And they're able to see things that we can't necessarily see when we're just evaluating a client in front of us and watching their eyes with our own eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's like a whole sci-fi version of this that I wasn't even aware of. That's cool.
I've kind of experienced that too, because years ago, I knew somebody. When Alicia and I had our in-person practice, there was a functional neurology practice below us, and I got friendly with them. And one of the chiros there did a lot of the functional neurology work, and I went through his assessment. We kind of traded a little bit, and I showed him some of our stuff. He showed some of his, and he took me through some of those assessments, and they had a lot of cool technology there. And so it was cool. They had like machines you would stand on, and they do like balance testing, and it would give you some data to work with, which was cool.
Yeah. Very cool. And for our listeners, we do have a whole episode on gait assessments.
Yep.
Specifically. So that's definitely, I would say, required reading for this episode if you haven't listened to it yet.
Yeah, and if you are a chiropractor, and you're likely going to be interested in that. It's a very fast form of assessment when you get good at it. It's 4 different neurologic categories that we kind of look at for gait, and I see that fitting in quite well, even if you're limited on time.
Yeah. But very briefly, could you just say like, okay, this is generally what we're doing with gait assessments, just for those people who haven't maybe listened to that episode yet?
Yeah, so we'll watch somebody walk. Typically, we set ourselves up behind them so that we can watch the person walk away from us, walk all the way down, turn around, come back. And we're looking for several different things. So first category is whether or not you see what we call a bobblehead. So a bobblehead literally is what it sounds like. While the person is walking, their head might be kind of bobbling around, making small oscillations that are out of rhythm with the rest of their walking. And it's pretty noticeable when you know what to look for, because it essentially looks like an unstable upper cervical spine, which can suggest that there are some higher order issues, maybe some problems happening with the eyes and the inner ear and the cervical spine itself. We also look at kind of what would be the opposite of that, which is more of a rigid neck. So if somebody has some issues there, they might have a very tight neck holding a lot of tension, which still could mean the same issues. It's just that their body is compensating for the instability by building tension in the neck. So that's one category that we would look at. We also would look at arm swing. So a loss of arm swing suggests that there might be several possible things happening with specific brain areas and pathways. Typically, the way that we describe this is that if I have reduced arm swing on my left side, I would want to look to the right cortex to possibly figure out, or possibly solve that. But there's some other pathways involved with arm swing that we talk about too. So if you see reduced arm swing, meaning reduced at the shoulder, that can point some arrows at those pathways and the opposite cortex. We also look at what is called cerebellar pattern. And there's a lot of ways to describe this, but generally speaking, when you see a cerebellar pattern in a reasonably healthy person while walking, you'll notice that it can take the form of shoulder internal rotation in the upper body, maybe with some scapular protraction as well. This can happen on one side or it can happen on both. In the lower body, it could be seen as hip internal rotation. So the hips are internally rotated, maybe looking like the pigeon walk, right, where the toes are in. And this can also happen on both sides of the body or just one. And then finally, the other category is called the PMRF, which stands for pontomedullary reticular formation, and that's the brainstem. Those patterns, similar in a way to the cerebellar patterns, you'll see it as different rotations happening in the joints. So in the upper body with a PMRF pattern, you might see some shoulder internal rotation and some depression of kind of the whole shoulder complex, thinking about it as like a loss of tone in the upper trap. It might also be accompanied by some increased flexion through the arm. So that may present as a little bit of increased flexion of the elbow. You also might see some pronation of the forearm. In some more extreme cases, some flexion of the wrist, hand, and fingers. So when you watch somebody walk away from you and they have an upper body PMRF pattern, one of the clues that you get right away is that you can see their palm as they're walking forwards, rather than having a bladed hand where their thumb might be pointed in the direction they're traveling. Because of all that pronation of the forearm and internal rotation of the shoulder and maybe the flexion in the hand, you see their palm. It looks like kind of a claw hand, if you will. And we can have that on one side of the body or both. And then finally, in the lower body with a PMRF pattern, we might see the duck walk, meaning their hips are outwardly rotated. We could see this on both sides of the body or one. So as we look through all the categories for neurologic gait assessment, each one of those things gives us some really big clues as to where we might want to start with our process. And the neat thing about it is neurologic gait assessment can also be used as an immediate form of reassessment. So picture this: if you're a chiropractor, let's say you look at someone's gait assessment and you see what you think is a cerebellar pattern. Maybe you've done some other assessments like a Romberg's or Sharpen Romberg's, and you think that this patient of yours might benefit from some spinal adjustments. However you do things, maybe you put them on the table and you adjust them. The next move would be to get them off the table and now have them walk again. And if you are doing the right things at the right, frequency and dose, you will actually see immediate either improvements or regressions in the person's gait. And that's how we work with applied neuro. Now, I'm not putting someone on a table and using adjustments. I'm doing other things, whether it's joint mobilizations, different exercises, whatever it is that we're doing. But I'm using gait as part of my immediate form of reassessment to see whether or not I'm doing the right thing. Because I don't know. I'm sort of theorizing, and I want to see, okay, how are they responding immediately? Because the nervous system will essentially put a thumbs up stamp or a thumbs down stamp on every single input that we use. So the quality of our work can be elevated dramatically by constantly rechecking how the nervous system is actually responding to the inputs in the moment versus just guessing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So gait assessment is fantastic. Definitely encourage you, if you haven't yet heard that podcast, to go check that one out, because it really goes deep into it.
Yeah. And I think even before, maybe you're still learning gait assessment, maybe you're not confident in IDing these different patterns right away, assessments need not be, you need not have that much education to do assessments, right? Like we talk about very simple assessments, touching your toes.
Yeah. Range of
doing
motion
the squat
also fits in really well to the practice.
Yeah. So I think peeling this back to even a more fundamental level, like if you're not assessing what your adjustments effect is,
Yes.
like that might be a really easy and powerful way to start integrating some of this stuff is just choose an assessment before and after and see if what you're doing is being thumbs upped by the nervous system.
Yeah. And that right there takes a lot of courage. Okay. This is where the obstacles really come into play.
Yeah.
Because there's time obstacles, right? And then there's this idea of, what if I'm wrong? What if I try something and I don't get the response that I'm looking for? What do I do next? I mean, that comes up a lot in our community when people are first learning.
Yeah.
There's fear. There's fear. And if you're really comfortable in the way that you do things, it's hard to force yourself out of that, right? Because that's what you're confident in. And, when you bring in this assess, reassess idea, you have to be okay with the fact that you might be wrong. And when you are, you're going to have to pivot and figure out something else that is going to work. And that's the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
Right. That's the biggest challenge. And you might also have to adjust your tools, because the adjustment model might not be enough to get the results that you're looking for, or it might just simply be the wrong stimulus for somebody. So you might have to, broaden the toolbox, right, as well over time. Okay. So it takes a lot of courage, right, to start to do that.
Yeah. The fear of saying like, okay, I'm doing this thing to help my client, and this assessment process is showing me that it's either not helping or actually hurting, right?
Yeah, right.
The fear is, like, okay, what's next? But, just from my vantage point outside of this, it actually sounds like it's a good thing to learn that early and adjust early, because otherwise you're doing something repeatedly maybe that you kind of have proven isn't actually solving the problem, right? Wouldn't it be better to be flummoxed for a while and then find the right thing than to just be using the same tool that isn't working?
Exactly. And yeah, it's and I think about, well, it makes me think, I may have told this story a long time ago in the podcast already, but it makes me think of that friend I had who worked below us, who was a chiro / functional neurologist. And I learned a lot from him. He was I was meeting him around the time that I was just starting to get into applied neuro. And so I wasn't familiar with a lot of the terminology, and I certainly didn't know my neuro back then like I do now. And one of the things that he said to me was so fascinating, because we talked about this. We talked about the adjustment model, because when I was working with him, like I was the client, he tried to adjust my sacrum and he couldn't get it. He was like, oh, he's laughing. He's like, sorry, man, I don't get a lot of practice with this anymore. But if you really want, I could go get, I forget her name, but his partner who he was working with in practice, and she could probably do it. And I was like, oh, no, it's cool, man. Just take me through your thing. Like whatever your process is, I just want to do it. And he's like, all right. He's like, and I asked him, like, why don't you get a lot of practice with that anymore? Isn't that a big part of what you do? And he's like, no. He's like, I don't do many adjustments anymore. I do a lot of this other functional neurology stuff.
Interesting.
Vestibular work, vision stuff, a lot of movement training with using metronomes. just a lot of good stuff.
All sounds familiar. Yep.
Yeah. And so he had made that, he'd kind of gone through that evolution in his own work. And I asked him, well, what is it about the adjustment model that you don't really care for anymore? And he's like, well, it's not my best tool. And what I found was a lot of the clients or patients that we were working with, because they had their focus actually was helping people after traumatic brain injury.
Oh, wow.
Doing a lot of like concussion rehab. And he said, what I found was, because they hook people up to machinery that tells them information about vitals. So they would have you hooked up to basically a high-tech pulse oximeter that would tell them your heart rate and your oxygen saturation and blood flow to the extremity. And they would keep track of your vitals. Those vitals would show him a lot of negative readings after having adjusted people. And so what he went on to explain to me was that metabolically, most people he worked with could not handle the high-speed adjustments and the change that took place. Their nervous system would perceive it as threatening.
Yeah, I was going to say their threat was elevated.
Yeah, so there was some dosage things there, and if the dose wasn't right, then it could be perceived as threatening. And I found that so fascinating. And so he had to pivot and, expand his toolbox. And that really resonated with me. And back then where I was just in a place where I wanted to learn new things that I could use. And I was sort of in a similar situation because previously I was using a lot of other different kinds of tools. One of them was kind of a fascial stretching technique. And I had a lot of reservations about it because through observations, I saw it fail a lot, even though the people I learned it from assured you that it never fails, kind of one of those things. Mm-hmm. But through observations, it's like something wasn't right and people weren't getting the results that I thought they should get. And so I was sort of in this similar transition where I'm learning all this new stuff and I'm figuring out how to guide a client based on assessments. And I remember being so kind of locked in to working in a certain way with this other form of stretching. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, when the world of applied neurology kind of collided with what I was already doing, obviously, because out of curiosity, I was like, well, maybe I better start assessing how people are responding to the stretching work that I'm doing with them. And I started doing that, and most of the time they were assessing very poorly. And it was scary because I was like, in my mind, I'm like, I dedicated all this time and effort to learning this thing. My clients are trusting that what I'm doing is the right thing. I didn't have a form of assessment to really understand whether or not they were responding good or bad. And now that I'm starting to look at that, I'm kind of sweating because I'm like, so what do we do now if there's no improvement or you're worse? Because that would happen a lot too. So it's kind of a scary place to be. But I'm glad I went through it because you have to, right? You have to have that wake up and learn that not everybody responds equally to the same stimulus. And if you're going to really help people, you have to have a toolbox full of different tools, and you got to pull the right tool for the right situation.
Right.
And you're not going to be able to understand very easily which tool for what job if you don't have some kind of assessment that will tell you better, same, or worse. Yeah. And so that's why I always say, like, the cornerstone of our business is the assessment process, right? Or all the different forms of assessments that we teach, because that's what tells you this is right or this is not right. Yeah.
And in that specific, with your functional neurology friend, in that specific context, it's possible he was dealing with, a population that just was predisposed to not handle adjustments well.
Yeah, more
whereas
sensitive.
Another population might take to it really well, and it could be consistently better, right?
It's possible. It's possible. Yeah, there's a lot of things, right, to potentially talk about, because one of the other interesting, well, we've talked about the table dilemma,
right?
In terms of manual therapy.
Yeah.
So those who aren't familiar, when you put somebody on a table and they receive a therapy, whether it's, some kind of manual therapy, the nervous system of that person that's laying on the table is a different nervous system than the one that's standing up. And it's kind of a simple way to think about it. The reason is that when you stand up and all these other high order systems, specifically your eyes and your inner ear, start integrating with proprioception as you move through the world, your muscle tone drastically changes. So let's say someone puts you on a table and they do a high-speed joint manipulation, like a chiro adjustment or some form of manual therapy. As soon as they stand up, it's very common for people to walk off those results. And I mean, sometimes almost instantly, like 5 steps and it's gone. But there's also something that maybe some people have heard before that's termed parking lot syndrome, where you receive some kind of therapeutic intervention on the table. You might feel really good when you stand up. By the time you walk back to your car, your pain comes back or whatever it is. That's a very common phenomenon. A lot of times that's happening because of the integration process. Once you stand up, it's just, you're a different person, right? So why would we do our work in a body position that is not specific to really where the position we want the person to be functioning in? So I do think there are still some instances where putting someone on a table is necessary to do the work, and there might be specific limitations that we have to work around. It might be difficult to do something because when someone's standing up, muscle tone is harder to work with, and perhaps you need them to be on the table. But here's the idea or concept that's super important. Passive therapies are lower percentage than active ones. So if I put you on a table and adjust you or do manual work in a passive way, because there was no active component to that, the person's brain and nervous system isn't really involved or doesn't really learn how to own the result. So what you do afterwards is really important if you are going to use any kind of table work. And this is where I'm always telling our manual therapists and our chiros in the community, one of the most important first steps that you could make by integrating this into your practice, in addition to just using range of motion testing or gait assessment, is to make sure that you follow up all of your passive interventions with active ones. And so simply put, if you get adjusted, follow up with learning how to actually move your spine. And that can work really well. It's almost like a sensory before motor type of concept that we teach, where you kind of primed the area, right? You got feedback on a specific body part, and now it's time to learn how to move it. And so just prescribing exercises that go with the work that you're doing, even if you still choose to do more passive stuff or even table work, that's a really wonderful step to make. And that alone will elevate a person's practice, because you get to send your patients or your clients home with homework.
Yeah.
And guess what? You don't actually get better in the office of a chiropractor. You get better in the time out of the office when you're doing the work. And that's where there's issues with the model, because the model is like, hey, show up every week, once a week or something, and get the work done, and come back next week. Really, what we need to do is encourage people to do the work on their own, and that's going to be that's going to facilitate better results long term.
Yeah, I could also see a scenario where adjustment or any intervention on the table could reduce threat enough that then they can do the exercise immediately after.
Yep, that's a good point.
Their neurology flips back on them, right?
Sometimes putting someone on a table or the ground, be it for some sort of passive therapy or even an active one, is the best place to start. It really is. But here's another idea. Again, for our chiros and manual therapists, it's huge. You can actually do the work standing up. I know you can't do it all, but especially if you're doing manual work on somebody, Have you ever considered doing the manual work while they're standing up? What you'll find if you start exploring that is that the results stick longer. It's really fascinating. You're doing the work more specifically to where you want that person to function best, under the dominance of all these other sensory systems that are helping them navigate through the world.
Right.
You can even get people into very position specific, you can essentially have them mimic a certain position that might be, useful for whatever their goal is. And you can do the manual interventions while they're standing. It's pretty cool. That's how I work when I'm, first of all, if I can teach any of our joint mobilizations to somebody in a standing position, I will choose to do that. Just because when people are active standing, the results just always seem to be better. But also if I happen to be working on a scar or doing sensory testing on somebody or applying kinesiotape, I will always try to do that when somebody is standing versus lying down, if possible. Just because I know the brain and the nervous system are going to learn faster and possibly integrate those results much better.
So you've laid out a couple really interesting tools that people can probably start applying immediately, right? You got the assess, reassess, right? So before you do your adjustment or whatever you're going to do in your session, you take a movement or range of motion test or something, a gait assessment if you've studied that. You do it before, then you do your intervention, and then you do it again after and see, hey, is this better, same, or worse? You've also talked about, instead of doing the adjustment on the table, do it standing, or maybe and have them do exercises right after the adjustment so that, when they're standing, they're actually using all of their higher order systems in the positions that you want them to be.
Exactly. Yep.
You mentioned cerebellar testing. I don't know if you want to briefly just kind of outline what that is.
Sure. Yeah. So basic cerebellar testing, we have a whole kind of, pile of cerebellar assessments, but basically what they are is a form of rapid coordinated movement. So essentially, if you take one hand and put it in the palm of your other hand, the top hand, you begin to essentially rapidly tap your opposite hand as quickly as you can. You're trying to coordinate a fast kind of rhythmic movement, trying to maintain, a nice consistent rhythm. And you would do that side to side to see if one side was lacking in coordination or maybe rhythm or maybe accuracy. That's one form.
Drummers would be really good at this.
Yeah. And you can do the same thing on the lower body. So you can tap one foot on the ground as quickly as you can. We usually run these tests for roughly 6 seconds is really all you need to be able to make these distinctions between right and left sides of the body. And most of the time, people can tell you right away as they start to compare. They're like, oh, that was my left hand. It feels really clumsy compared to my right. So we have a whole bunch of cerebellar assessments kind of specific to different body areas, not just using the hands and the feet, but also coordinating movements from like the shoulder area, the elbow area, the hips. We even have some midline forms of cerebellar assessments, things like Romberg's assessments, where you bring your feet together in a narrow stance, close your eyes, and you just balance there. And then there's a progression called the sharpened Romberg's, where you're standing in a tandem stance. You can test people with their eyes open, but you can also test them with their eyes closed. This also gives you feedback on the cerebellum, especially if you perturb them. So one of my favorite forms of cerebellar testing is to put someone in one of those positions and have them balance, eyes open or closed, depending on the individual. And then I stand behind them and they don't know which side I'm going to bump them from, but I just take my hand and I give them a little bit of a bump to challenge their stability. And you can see how especially their trunk is responding. Like how quickly does the person respond to the perturbation, because they should restabilize. And so sometimes if people lose their balance and they need to recover position, or they kind of lag, meaning you bump them, they lose their position and they take a while to get back to center. That gives you information on, how is the midline cerebellum functioning to help maintain midline stabilization. So those assessments are great. They're fast. You can run through several of them really quickly. And they can also be used not only as like an initial assessment to learn about brain function, they can also be used as a reassessment.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool because that means you can go and do some of the things that you want to do, retest with the cerebellar assessments. And if you see an upgrade in the quality of movement, that becomes a high payoff drill. You know you're on the right track.
Now, obviously, when you start talking about cerebellar assessments and gait assessments, there's a bit of study involved. And
yeah,
especially not necessarily in doing the assessments, although you need to know what to look for, but in what to do next, right?
Yes.
Because this is giving you clues as to what to do next, to what tools to pull out of your toolbox, things to try, right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously we're not going to be able to discuss the whole breadth of applied neurology here right now, but one of the challenges that came up that we were alluding to earlier was that people feel like they don't necessarily have the time in their sessions to actually kind of follow up on these assessments or even do the assessments, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think you've provided some kind of fast, easy ways to start integrating it.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens when you've done the work, you've studied, you kind of got all these different tools in your arsenal, neuro tools in your arsenal that you could incorporate, but you're not exactly sure how much time to dedicate to it, whether your clients will take you seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Like what about that pain point in transitioning?
Well, I mean, this is a little bit of a hard pill to swallow because in the end, not everybody wants to work as hard as we are. Like they just want to maybe do whatever they do comfortably, use their 20 minutes with a patient or client and be done.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not that person and you're trying to get more out of your client sessions and help people, to the best of your ability, it's a hard pill to swallow, but you're going to have to consider changing your business model. Because if you're only allowed 15 minutes with somebody, what in the world can you do in 15 minutes? Now, I know you can lean on chiropractic adjustment model and give people relief, no question.
Mm-hmm.
There's no question. But if you want to take them further, right? If you're that person, you're going to have to consider changing the model. Because if you only have 15 minutes, 15 minutes for me is enough to, I don't know, start history taking. It's like I couldn't get to anything. Right.
You got to talk about the weather. You got to.
Yeah, right. You gotta BS at the beginning. You got to get into history.
Yeah.
Run some assessments. I mean, gosh, I have to educate a new client on the reassess process and get them squared away with that.
Right.
I have to educate them on what pain is and where it comes from so that they're not shell shocked that, there's, how people with pain, general population clients, they assume the worst.
Right.
Right. And a lot of times it's not as bad as they think. Okay. So there's a lot of education that has to be, foundations that have to be laid. I can't imagine having 15 or 20 minutes with somebody. So I feel for you if that's the biggest issue. And you may have to think about adjusting your business model. And I know that comes with a lot of complications, but people do it. People do it. They change their practice because they're frustrated. They don't necessarily want their clients just walking off the results by the time they get to the car. They want to do more. They want to educate people. If you're really going to help somebody long term, it's really the art of behavior change versus even applying a stimulus. Because once you as a coach or a practitioner, you're going to do the best work when you become an options facilitator for the person. And you take them through this to figure out where do they have to spend the most time and what do they have to do to practice. And then it's your job to get them to understand what it actually takes to create long-term change, right? That kind of consistency, the volume, the intensity. And of course, there's going to be lots of ups and downs along the way that you have to be able to help them navigate and interpret, right? So if you're the person that wants to get more for your clients, you have to be willing to make those adjustments to the business model. Maybe start an entirely new service. Don't bail on what you're already doing. Start an entirely new service where, you get to spend more time with people, right? And you get to teach them exercises and not just lean on, the adjustment model or some sort of manual therapy. You actually get to run them through assessments, see how they're responding, give them homework exercises, follow up, right? That's a big one.
Yeah, we had a great response from one of the dojo members when you're asking for questions. I believe his name was Sean, and he was on
Sean,
the podcast. So
he's
you
been
can go
on,
back and listen to how he's integrated this into his practice quite tremendously. It sounds like
unbelievable. Yeah.
If I'm not misremembering, I think he said something along the lines of like he was already kind of known as the movement guy in the office. So he had already kind of established this other part of his practice. And so when he started adding the neuro on top, it kind of fit into that model already.
Right.
But it sounds like that could be a way to do it, is like, okay, we can do our 15, 20-minute adjustments, but you seem like you'd be a really good candidate for this other thing that I'm working on, where I'm really trying to help people with movement and using some of this neuro stuff. Like, how would you feel about, this other service that's an hour? And,
absolutely.
I think it would be really helpful for you. And I think he also mentioned that he started when he was less confident in, applying this stuff, right? Because imposter syndrome, the first time you do it, you're like, do I know what I'm doing?
Yeah, he was already doing a lot of great things and was very educated, but I think he was sort of torn between, he was sort of in that state that I went through as well, that his story really resonates with me, where you're working really hard to learn new things and to apply them, but you don't actually know what your impact is, because you can't organize it in a way that's working for you yet. And you're not sure if people are responding the way you hope they're responding, because you're just simply not checking. You're not checking the right things. And so he's just done amazing at figuring out how to integrate the different forms of assessment that we have. And the cool thing is he never abandoned what he was already doing. And that's when I think neuro really shines, is when you can kind of sprinkle it on top of the other things you're doing. You might gravitate towards doing more neuro work because it's so powerful, but he didn't abandon the other things. And I feel like he's just now grown a larger toolbox.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that he did, I think early on, was he mentioned, at first I kind of only applied this to the clients that seem more receptive to it and seem more like willing to do the work. And that's a cool way to like kind of find your footing as well, as like, hey, let's go on this journey together a little bit.
Yes.
I had a piano teacher growing up, and she was classically trained, and she was getting really into jazz. And so she had this like jazz teacher that was teaching her. And then I was this young kid, and she realized that I was really gravitating more to jazz than like to the classical stuff. And so she really enjoyed teaching me what she was learning.
That's
you know
cool.
what I mean? And like I was, it's piano, so it's like a different thing. It's not your health and wellness, right? But I think some people would be really excited to kind of be along for that ride and be like, I'm in pain. I'm willing to try this with you. I trust you. Yep. Let's do this.
I resonate with that as well, because when we were shifting our practice and getting away from, the fascial stretching technique that I talked about and some of the other things, I did have to kind of selectively pick who I was going to do more neuro work with, because this is another big obstacle. The general population is very limited in the education that they have. And, we live in a society that kind of is, really fixated on quick solutions.
Yeah.
Right. They just want to make a pit stop. It's like bringing your car to the shop, and it's like, hey, can you change the oil and do the brakes while you're at it, and then I'm out of here. Yeah. Right. And I can go on not caring about my car. Admittedly, that's how I am with my vehicle. Like I bring it down there. It's like, okay, do the stuff. All right. Thanks. See you next time. Right. And you can't treat your body like that, but the general population doesn't have enough education to know that. And the chiropractic model, the classical one, is very attractive to them because people are like, well, I'm going to go in, the person's going to give me the snap, crackle, pop. That's going to put my joints back into place and fix me, and I'll go back if I need it again later. So that there's just a big obstacle in terms of education. And so some people, not everybody's going to be a perfect fit for applied neuro work.
Right.
And that's fine. The people who really want it, they want to explore other things and they want to get better, they're willing to do the work. Those are the ones that you want to do applied neuro with, and other things. Mm-hmm. Some people maybe are a better fit for something that is kind of a faster solution. But, here's the thing that people need to think about, regardless of what your profession is. It has to be enjoyable for you and rewarding for you too. I mean, that is important for longevity of your career. A lot of chiropractors that only do adjustment model and they get sucked into that factory, do you want to know what happens to them? Their body breaks down and then they have to stop. Even manual therapists too. You would not believe how hard it is to give someone a massage of some kind, right? The amount of body control that you have to use and the force that you have to direct into their body at times, depending on the style. Chiropractic is similar. You have to use your body and put an adjustment into somebody. And every single adjustment that you give somebody, guess what? You get it too. The energy you put into somebody comes right back into your body. It's way harder work than you could imagine, especially if you're given 40 adjustments in a day or working with 40 people. I actually I had a chiropractor as a client many years ago. She told me the number of adjustments she was doing a day. It was so many, I couldn't believe it. It was like a factory. I don't remember the exact number, but it was up there. It might have been 40 or more people she was working with.
Yikes.
And she talked about her body really hating that. So there's a lot of other things. Are you setting yourself up for longevity with your career? Do you actually get the reward from the work that you're doing? I personally feel like it's much more rewarding to give somebody tools that empower them, that, they're getting your guidance and your help, maybe to get them started, but you're now giving them something that they can carry on. I mean, I have clients, people that I've worked with who do not work with me anymore. Once in a while, touch base, and they're like, I'm still using those exercises or the assessment process, basic range of motion testing to see how I respond. Like, woke up on a Friday, had weird back pain, didn't know why, started using my range of motion testing and pulled out the old lumbar front circles that you taught me, during our second session together. And well, it served me again. Boom.
Yeah.
That's very rewarding to give people those tools and empower them so that they can make some decisions for themselves and do things for their own body, versus the other, which is, okay, I guess I got to go to my chiro again. The last time didn't work. Go get adjusted again. So there's a lot to consider. And it's not just about chiros either. It's any type of therapy that you're providing somebody. You have to eventually run it through the filter and realize that as cool as they made it sound when you were in school or when you did the seminar, it is still one therapy, and not everyone responds equally to the same stimulus. And there's so many factors that go into the work. So it's better to have a toolbox in a way to understand how the person in front of you is responding in the moment.
Yeah. It's so cool to hear you explain what's happening with adjustments and whatnot from a neuro lens, and like just applying neuro to these other practices I find endlessly fascinating. But I'm curious, what's something that you have learned or that you think you could learn from chiropractic?
Probably the things that I would want to learn are things you have to carry a license for. So it may be a little bit challenging because, on paper, I'm a personal trainer, right, which is funny to think about. I'm like a personal trainer from outer space, like I said, chiropractors. Well, here's the thing. I actually would like to know how to adjust people.
Yeah.
I would use that tool. I think I could use that tool very effectively in the right situation. And I think that I could learn how to do that extremely easily. And I'm not saying that it doesn't take skill. It takes enormous skill. But remember, I'm a wrestler and a jiu-jitsu guy. So like if you teach me how to put my hands on someone and manipulate their joints, like that's right up my alley.
Right. Sure.
So I actually think I would like to know how to do that. And I think what I would do is I would run it through the lens that I use and play with some ways to maybe make it more effective for the individual based on their needs, whether that's having them in different positions, doing the work standing up, stacking other, listen, once you understand applied neuro, like all of a sudden it's not like which tool is better. It's like you become interested in all the tools. And I can't help but think that using that methodology and stacking vision work in there, stacking sensory work in there, could be really fabulous.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. I can only imagine some of the interesting results you might get doing some of those combinations.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I'm thinking, how many clients have I had in the past who just cannot move their neck? They, for whatever reason, it's hard to teach people how to move their neck and how to like actively start to coordinate these movements. I mean, I think using a chiropractic adjustment in the right way, as long as it's respecting the dose, you could possibly use it and kind of that similar to like a sensory before motor kind of application where you are passively doing something to kind of open up a window for greater learning by following up with the active thing next. And I think it could be used quite well in that scenario.
Yeah. Awesome. Anything else you want to leave us with today?
I think just having read through the thread in the community, I think it came up a couple times. We do have some chiropractors that are learning in our courses, and several of the comments were something to the effect of, when I try the thing that works for me and it doesn't work for my patient, I essentially clam up and go back to what I was doing before. And I know we kind of talked about that a little bit today, but that is supposed to happen. That's the paradigm shift that I'm wanting every one of our students to encounter. I want you to go, oh boy, like not everyone does respond equally to the same stimulus. And, now I have to pivot. And so that's part of the process. And it's what you decide to do next that matters most. And you have to be okay with being wrong. I tell our students all the time, if you try to be right with applied neuro, you're going to get smoked. You're just going to go and find something that's marketed as a protocol based system. And you're going to follow the protocol because it feels more comfortable. And you're just going to, do that. If you try to be right with applied neuro, you're going to get smoked because every single individual is different. And even the same individual on a different day is a different nervous system. Is not easy work when you're really trying to help the person in front of you, because humans are living ecosystems, right? Everything's constantly changing, right? So I want the paradigm shift to happen for you. And if you're having those moments where the thing that worked for you didn't work for the person in front of you, just embrace that and try the next thing, whatever it is. And we'll help you figure out the right choice. It doesn't mean it's going to, be the thing they need, but it'll be the next best choice. And force yourself to work through that process, because your clients don't actually care if you're wrong in the moment necessarily. They really care most about the fact that you're trying because the last person didn't. I mean, that's kind of where we're at with healthcare. Almost nobody even gets a history taken these days.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. You can go to your primary care and get a prescription for medication and nobody asked you anything about your history. It's scary. So your clients can feel when you're putting in the effort. And even if the result is not the one you were hoping for, you're just collecting data, just move on. Don't become emotionally attached to what happened or what you want to happen. Just find the next thing, continue the process. And those repetitions in the end are going to get you to a place where you're more confident with facilitating the whole process, and you'll figure it out. That's how it goes down. And even after 15 years of doing this, I'm not always right with what I do, and I'm cool with that. I just move on. I move on and try to find the next best solution.
Yeah, I think there's a pattern to your stories when you talk about specific clients with problems and interventions. And, usually the story unfolds in a matter of minutes, and you try this one thing that you didn't try and problem solved, and immediately, that everything's great. But in that story is actually a million little dead ends that you went down, or you were trying something and things were helping, but you couldn't get that last 10%, that last 2%. And it's a process.
Mm-hmm.
It's a process. That success story has a bunch of sessions in front of it where we didn't fix the problem 100%.
That's right. That's right. And as professionals, we have to be willing to go against cultural norms in order to get to a point where we can work at this level and be good with the material. Because, here's the thing. Sadly, prevention does not sell, right, in our industries. So that's problematic and kind of feeds into the education problem in the general population, because people are expecting the quick fix. That's what they want. We all want that, I guess. But, prevention doesn't really sell as well. And so it's tough, right? And that's why it's up to us to always educate the people we're working with. And that educational process, guess what? It ends up working as your filter. And if you educate every person that comes through your door, that filter will take place, that filtering process. And all of a sudden you love all your clients. They're a perfect fit for you. And you're able to go through this process, and people are willing to watch you struggle, right? And be a part of it. And that's why we talk about assessing and reassessing, so that the person can feel like they are engaged in the session. No one ever asked them what they thought, or how they felt. And, all of a sudden you are, and you're going to find that most of the people you work with really love that. And just based on feeling the care, I think as a practitioner, you're going to get better results just based on that. Regardless of whether or not you hit a home run with the right drills, people, if the environment is a positive one and it's an environment where you're working together, that goes a long way. All right, there it is. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope that if you are a chiropractor, that it was exciting to know that there's a lot of things out there that you could learn on the side of applied neurology that may fit into your practice really well. Thank you guys so much for supporting the Cruise Elite podcast. If you've really been enjoying these episodes, something that you could do for us that really goes a long way is to head on over to either Apple or Spotify and make sure to give us a 5-star review. It's super helpful. That's it for today. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon.